Hello and welcome to Epic Flail. In this video we're talking about the Kingdom of Bretonnia. I'm joined by Colton. He's a member of our online community on Discord, and he takes me through his whole 2,000 point Bretonnian Exiles list. He goes through every single unit, why it's in there, what it does, how it works with the rest of the list, and ultimately how the whole list plays on the table. I was really impressed by this list. It sounds really competitive and it sounds really fun to play. It's a bit different. It's not like those kind of grand army lists that we're seeing everywhere and are becoming fairly standard. This is a bit different. It'll catch a lot of people off guard, and it's got some really cool synergies. So I get into the detail with Colton. I also ask him about the meta and how it's going over there and what the scene's like. We have a really interesting chat there. So I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. It was a really cool chat. And whether you're playing Bretonnia or you're just interested in, hearing about armies interact, there's definitely something for you in this video. And while I've got your attention, please consider being a member of the channel. It's only $2.99. You'll get to join our Discord, come chat Old World with us, come talk to Colton and ask him about his list. And he's been really active on the Discord, just like sharing the developments and growths and changes in the list. So come chat to me, come chat to Colton, come chat to our other Old World members, and check out the rest of our members videos that you get for becoming a member and supporter of the show. But anyway, enough of that. On to the video. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Look after yourselves, take care, and thanks for watching. Colton, thanks so much for joining me on the show today, my friend. I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. Happy to jump on. I love talking about Old World.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about our community, there are a whole bunch of people that just want to get involved and share their gaming experiences and what they're doing and what they're up to. So I appreciate you reaching out from the Discord. Whereabouts are you based then, my friend? Where are we calling in from?
Yeah, so calling out of Utah, so the United States of America, state of Utah, city is Salt Lake, so definitely very far from the UK.
Yeah, a bit of a trek, mate. It'd be difficult for us to pop over and have a game, wouldn't it? But the beauty of the internet means we can record and do things like this. So we're going to be talking about your sort of interpretations and experiences of Old World, and we're also be getting into a bit of a detail around Bretonnia list, which is dear to my heart. I love Bretonnia. I always play Bretonnia on Total War. I remember playing Bretonnia when I was a small child when they first came out. I've always loved the idea of a really powerful Knight's Charge and that kind of combined arms that they offer. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about general Old World reflections, but let's get straight into it. How have you found Old World so far, and how has your community that you're playing in engaged with and got on with the game so far?
So my first impression of Old World is I like it more than any system from GW's put out. I've basically stopped playing anything else because I just love Old World so much. So I've got a limited amount of game time, and so it's just the best. So I'm just gonna play it. As far as the community goes, a lot of the players came from 30K, which was already a niche system, and so we were all already used to being like, hey, we're just playing something niche, and most everyone is more experienced hobbyists, been in the game, sees in the systems longer, and so we were all able to just say, hey, you know what, we're just gonna go and start playing Old World. A couple people came over from Sigmar, and a couple new people have come, but mostly it's just seasoned people from our local clubs that just said, hey, I've always wanted to play this, and I'm really glad it's back.
Yeah, nice. I think we've got a similar thing here where it's kind of drawn in a few people from other systems, and there are also people that have just been waiting for the chance to get back into fantasy and just kind of been sat there playing other systems waiting to give it a go. So you're enjoying the game a great deal. What's the community like? How many people have you got like engaging at the club and playing the game? How big's the community that you?
Yeah, so there's basically 4 stores that have it going on. The closest store, the most central store, it has 20 people in a slow grow league. So a lot of people show up to play slow grow, and they've just now gotten to 2,000 points. And so I'm hoping that there's going to be some more going on soon. There's one store up north, one store further south, and another store fairly close to the store with the slow grow. And they've each got 3 to 4 dedicated players at each of those stores. And so when we try to get events, at least those people that are experienced players can come. But we're struggling to get more than up to 10 people at a time. But I'm hoping now that the slow grows at 2,000 points, we can start peeling those players in.
And I guess one thing we were just chatting about before we got started is they're kind of like trickling the releases of Old World a little bit out there. It's kind of like, we've got Tomb Kings and Bretonnia to go with. And people prior to that maybe had some limited forces that they could play with, like really old models, or they've done resin cast, but like it's not the releases are coming out. Orcs and Goblins now out, but it's not a super fast snappy pace, is it? It's kind of a gradual rollout of those armies. I did expect to have seen a bit more by now, to be honest. Like, we're in May and we've we've only really seen orcs and goblins fully out there in the open. It's not been a very punchy unveiling of armies to play, which I can imagine hinders the growth of a lot of communities.
Absolutely. Well, and even the dwarf release, like they've announced it how long ago now? I've almost forgotten about it.
Yeah, me and Rob went to Nottingham to Warhammer World for the release to see the orcs and goblins and stuff. People were chatting then like, oh, the dwarf dice have been revealed, dwarfs are going to be out, but like, yeah, there's still nothing. So it's not been a very rapid release, but it's good. That sounds decent numbers wise. Sounds like there's some real passion for the game and people getting involved in playing it and rolling dice, which is great.
Yeah, people really like it. The slow grow, like you mentioned, that there's only so many armies available. It is heavily concentrated in majority Tomb Kings and then subsequently Bretonnia.
Good old
so
Bretonnia.
It's very concentrated from the slow grow people.
Let's get right into the detail of Bretonnia then, because like I've done a few videos now, kind of talking about my Bretonnia list and like tinkering with it and editing it. I played a bunch of games with that version of the list. I've done like shows where I've had people come in and kind of chat to me. So let's start broad and then start to refine it. How are you finding Bretonnia as a faction? How are you enjoying them at the table, finding some of their like strengths and weaknesses?
So my favorite thing about Bretonnia right now is the fact that it can get across the board and it can engage the enemy. And so a lot of the game can kind of happen at the pace that I want it to. And that's very satisfying because you just say, hey, this is when I want combat to happen. And it's happening now. Whether I'm going to win or not, it's another thing, but it's happening.
Because that is that can be from playing a lot of fantasy when I was younger. One of the most negative experiences I'd have, and it's a bit like 40k now with indirect fire, where people would just be like, you can't get me, I'm going to sit at the back, there's not much you can do about it, you've got to come to me. And it's kind of like quite an oppressive play style. Like, I guess one of the challenges of Old World is to create a system by which it prevents like negative play and people just sitting on the back line with all the guns, all the war machines, and being like, you've got to advance towards me. But yeah, I found a similar thing with Bretonnia. It's like they get a turn to shoot you, and then you're going to hit them. Do you know what I mean? Like if you screen well at deployment, you never really go first. Although are you playing a list where you
my list is designed to go first,
down,
and we'll talk more about what happens when it goes first.
Yeah, because I really love to get into the detail of your list and kind of talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses. But if we just stay broad for a minute, so you're liking the fact that they can get across the board, they can, they've got that really long threat and they can get stuck in. What are some of the challenges you find with them as a faction? Some of the weaknesses?
Mm-hmm. They're humans. I mean, the Knights of the Realm, it's strength 3, toughness 3, and if archers look at you, you're going to lose models. It's painful. Yeah,
T3 is rough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like in your head, you kind of think, oh, they're going to be 4, they're strong. But I know it's humans in Old World. It's 3. Like, it's a little bit lame. Yeah, so like they definitely...
T4 is one of those break points that it's tough to really points cost appropriately what that difference is worth because it just matters in so many interactions. It's hard.
Do you find the lances are challenging to maneuver sometimes? So like I've kind of the games that I've had, obviously deployment feels unbelievably key. Like deployment is just like so imperative as to like setting everything up. But I can definitely see challenges in how and where you apply the lances. Like they can kind of go in and hit something and you like won that combat, smash a unit. Whereas other times I've experienced them kind of hitting things and then you're like, uh-oh, they've not done the damage that you needed to, and they're just all stood there like, oh, we're about to get hit in the flank and blunted, So like, how have you found that dynamic of like making sure that the lances are appropriately positioned and hitting the right units?
Well, I'm sure everyone says this, but I am like remarkably bad at rolling dice. And so if it's like a coin toss, I'm not going to get it. And so it's really tough where very rarely can you just hit a unit in any army, hit a unit so hard that it breaks and flees and you get a chance to run it down.
And like Grail Knights, I found some Grail Knights can hit some stuff.
Oh, good.
And fold a unit. I've got a unit of Grail Knights that like, if the stars are aligned and the dice are warm.
And the dice are warm, for sure.
It'll smash a bit.
So what I am, and this will kind of bleed more into the list, I only run one unit of Knights of the Realm, specifically because if I run too many, then they're just hanging back, not doing anything. Because there's really only one unit or so that the opponent's going to present that's the right softness that the Knights can hit and push through. or do enough damage that's relevant for the hand weapons the subsequent turn without just being tied up and getting murdered.
Yeah, I'm really keen to get into detail. I'm going to hold you up. You're like a dog on a lead. You know, we want to get into the detail of the list, but so I just want to just hold on the faction for a second. So they got they can get across the board quickly. They've got that kind of like ability to just close a distance and maybe push back against some of those armies that want to sit on the back of the board. You can kind of engage on your terms because of the speed. T3 is a little bit of a downside. How have you found the magic? Are you running wizards in your list? Have you found their ability to hold themselves aggressively and defensively?
Yeah, so I've started by just maximizing the magic I could put in there, and over time I'm taking less and less because I just don't compete well enough compared to the other factions out there. A huge amount of my local meta is Warriors of Chaos. A lot of people just had a Warriors of Chaos Age of Sigmar army already, and they just put square bases on it. And that 50-point Infernal Puppet is honestly one of the most oppressive things in the game.
Chat us through that. I'll get it up on the screen. I'll bring it up on the screen as we chat. But talk us through that ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an expensive piece of war gear. I think they probably price it appropriately. But what happens is a 24-inch aura around your spellcaster, whoever has it, which is basically spellcaster. Your opponent, when they go to cast a spell, they roll 3d6, drop the highest. And so that's really the long and short of it. So even if you put it on a level 1 or level 2 wizard, it's still a 24-inch aura. It's not their dispel aura. And so they can, if they really wanted to, throw it out there fairly inexpensively. But most of the time, they're running a level 4. They're putting the Infernal Puppet on it. So you're already struggling to cast, let alone then having to go up against a level 4 dispel.
So run us through the specifics of the rule. You when you're casting, you roll 3 dice. You take away the highest.
Yeah.
So it basically significant. I think on average, does that drop your roll by 2? So like 7s become 5. 2 dice. The average on 2 dice would be 5. I think it knocks like 2 off, doesn't it? 2.5. Something like that. It's pretty bad. It's pretty difficult to cast anything.
Well, and then you consider there's not really a lot of 7 up to cast spells, right? A lot of it's kind of hitting 8, and then not if you're trying to do demonology or like a good spell where they're like 10 up to cast, so they're really powerful. But even just a fireball, 7's not going to do it.
Yeah. So you've found in that kind of like meta where there's very strong like magic play, or I guess like denial. It's just not really worth you maxing out.
Well, and again, we'll get more to my list, but I play Exiles exclusively, and so I can't even take a level 4 if I wanted to. I think there's definitely the Lady Elise Duchard, or however you pronounce her name in French.
That was beautiful, mate. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you. She, I think, is Bretonia's answer to the Magic game, because now on any doubles, she's forcing you to roll on the miscast table when she dispels. I think that model has a lot of play, and I'm really excited for people to start running it. Because it's like I just looked it over and I said, "Wow, I wish I could have that, but I can't run a prophetess." So
not allowed. You've picked the naughty bunch of all the Bretonian options.
Yeah, I chose to play on hard mode a little bit, and that's kind of on me. So that's just fine.
Go on, let's get into your list. So you're running Exiles. Talk us about why you picked that, some of the benefits of it, the strengths, and then let's get into the details of what you take.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the starting reason why I took Bretonnia is because there's a lot of took Exiles is because a lot of people took Bretonnia to start with. And so I want something a little bit different, even though I also love the night theme. The second reason is when I play Total War, which I love it,
Great game.
I actually like starting over in the Araby on the coastline in the south. And that's kind of
scrapping all the Tomb Kings. Is that the
Yeah.
that's the Tomb King area, isn't it?
Yeah. And so when the box set came out, Tomb Kings versus Bretonnia, I was like, well, that's very much on the nose.
Yeah.
It's really their Exiles. And so I loved that. I liked Sir Cecil Gaston. I thought that was a cool lore blip. So I'm like, I want to run that. I want to try to make it work. And so I've done a lot of iterations, but we'll just run through what I've got right now. I've got it pulled up on the screen here.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm running a Baron to start with, and on a Royal Pegasus, he's got a basic lance. As far as magic items, he's going to have the Gromil Great Helm and the Seal of Paravon, but his virtue is the virtue of heroism. And this guy, so I mentioned earlier that I'm not good at rolling, but it's enough dice, and I've only done him once so far, so we'll see as more playtest goes on. But in my last game, I was against Warriors of Chaos, and I was able to just base to base their sorcerer, just sneak him in there, base to base him. Hey, I'm directing all my attacks on here because I don't have Gauntlet of the Duel on him. So I found that it still kind of works out. So I go on the sorcerer, and I rolled a hit. It's on threes. That's what Sealed Paragon does. Is you hit on threes, no modifiers,
All the time. Yeah.
which is really nice actually, especially because I can't take a Duke, and so I don't have a lot of the same weapon skill that a lot of other people do. And so being able to go from fours to threes is helpful. So I get 3 hits out of the 4, and then I rolled a wound, and the first 2 dice stop as ones. And I got the third dice spinning, and I'm like, what's going to happen? And it's a 6. And so I got the killing blow come through. I'm like, wow, okay, now we're talking. And he fails the ward save, and then all the wounds are gone. And I was like, okay, that's how it feels to make it work. So even though statistically I rolled very poorly, but the 1 dice that you're kind of fishing for. So I really liked it. The Royal Pegasus is an amazing model. I like it more than the Hippogriff because it keeps the skirmish to 360, whereas you lose it with the close order on the Hippogriff. So we'll get more into it and how the list plays, but yeah, I love
the Great Helm. The Great Helm gives the reroll +1 to armor save and reroll ones.
Yeah, so he's on a 2-up with rerolling ones.
Rerolling ones, yeah, that's what I.
So if you don't have
awesome.
AP, he's not dying. And even if you got like an ensorcelled weapon, very common in the meta, is just that AP -1. That's not doing it. If I'm on 3s rerolling 1s, like I'll fight you all day on those terms.
Yeah,
so
I found that there's a lot of people struggling with the Bretonnia. I know you've got a Baron there, but like Bretonnian Dukes that just like go in and don't die and just start killing everything. They're it's quite a powerful piece on the table.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. The next one I have, and this is the one that I do throw out the challenges with. This is my I call him my dueling paladin, but basically he's a paladin. He's on just a barded Pegasus, and he's got the Frontier Axe, which is an Exiles exclusive piece of equipment. It's strength +2, but it's AP 3, just always. It's 2-handed, magical attacks, and a flat 2 damage. And so it goes in there, takes the challenge, and it kills stuff. Like AP 3 will kill you, and I only really oftentimes need 2 wounds to go through to get through your ward save, through your regen. Very few things have more than 4 wounds unless it is a dragon or something like that.
That seems pretty good.
He's taking the Virtue of Knightly Temper, so even though he's hitting on 4s, he's got full rerolls, so he's getting most of his hits, and the extra D3 attacks, he will go through and kill something.
What's giving him the full rerolls?
The Virtue of Knightly Temper.
The Virtue gives, does it give hatred, D3 attacks and hatred?
Exactly.
Against whatever you're attacking, and hatred gives the rerolls. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, so he is excellent. The one downside about being the 2-handed weapon is if I'm getting into a combat that I think I might not kill him, I'm not going to throw out the challenge with the Paladin, because on the swing back, he's only a 3-up armor. Because, so he's not a 3-up armor, so he's got the heavy armor, he's got the Barded Pegasus, so he's at a 4-up. He's got a shield, but that's only for shooting. The axe puts him to 2-weapon.
You need your
2-handed.
Yeah.
And so he's actually not that durable on the swing back. And so if I know that they're going to have a reasonable chance at surviving, I'll throw out the challenge with someone else.
Yeah, nice. Mm-hmm. Looking good. What else you got?
And then I've got the money-making paladin. This is the battle standard bearer, who, as soon as I threw down the money to actually buy this model, I have not regretted it a moment. I've been very happy with him ever since. He's always made it worth it. That was one of my biggest complaints with the Bretonnia at the first part is things don't die fast enough, and there's so much static combat res that I will, even if I kill way more than they do, I'll still either tie or lose the combat or not, or win the combat, but not enough to force them to still do a fallback in good order. Because then I'll lose the lances. If I lose the lances, it's a hurting game.
Yeah.
And so the battle standard bearer, I've got him with the war banner because I need that. The Royal Pegasus, that's what he came with. But what I've got on him is he runs the Falcon Horn of Freedomland, which is the number 1 piece of tech every Bretonnian list needs. This is great. So a lot of people put him on the Baron or some of their higher leadership characters because it's a better chance to get the roll off. I keep him on the Paladin because this Paladin has the virtue of the ideal. So he's actually not with a unit. He comes in and just charges along with everyone else. So I still get the warband, I still get all those things. But this gives him that extra pip of leadership, another attack, improved weapon skill. And so he's able to come in and just toot that horn off, and suddenly there's no flying for the opponent. Another benefit is, so I run this list. It's an Exiles list, so everyone's on the Exiles vow. I don't run any other vow. So
remind us of the Exiles vow again, just for people watching. Just remind us of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, you're giving up the other benefits on the basic Knight's vow for stubborn and veteran. That's the main difference. And so that Falcon Horn is rerollable for that leadership check. And so it's suddenly rerollable looking for a 9. It's very consistent to go off.
Yeah. Do you miss, and we will come and go through the list, but do you miss not having the normal vow? And that kind of like the ward save? Because
oh man,
I played so many games where I'm like, oh man, this ward save is just so helpful. It's saving me so many models.
Yeah,
it sort of scares me going outside of it.
Having being able to pray at the beginning, but these guys can still earn the blessings of the lady.
Sure,
and that's kind of one of the exciting the theme that I like to play when I go is I am always like I'm very excited when I can earn the blessing. It feels like a game. Yeah, it's a very exciting, and my opponent notices because that first round of combat, even if it's in the challenge, the way that the rule says it's at the end of combat. So even if I'll win a challenge at a very high initiative step, and I know that at the end of the combat I'm going to get the blessing, but I don't get the saves during that full round, and so I could lose a couple models and feel really down about it. But then that ward save comes on, and we're suddenly obviously 30% more durable.
So you win and just to remind people, you win a combat to get the lady's blessing.
Yeah, so you either win a challenge or run a unit down. Those are the two ways to get the blessing. If you lose the blessing for any reason, you can't get it back. And so I'll be once I've got a blessing, I'm very sensitive about if I pick a combat that I might be forced to withdraw from or flee or something. Definitely don't want to do that.
And it goes on the whole unit or the model. So if it's a model winning a challenge, it goes on the model.
Yeah, it's on the unit. So the characters, they go into a unit because I want everyone to get that effect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great, cool. Keep going through your list, mate. It sounded good. What else you got?
Absolutely. So the Battle Standard Bear Paladin, he has a charmed shield because he's by himself, and I had the points for it. But basically, for 3 points, if I haven't had the blessing yet, I can still, for that really, really important wound save, I can make sure I've got a ward on it. And so it helps kind of push through that really tough challenge or something, so I can make sure that he gets his blessings as well. He's got the Gauntlet of the Duel, so that he can throw out a challenge to make sure that someone has to accept it, so that he can try to earn it. But if he earns it, because he's by himself, he doesn't pass off to anyone else, if that makes sense. So he's got to kind of churn those up himself. And then he has the virtue of the ideal, like I already mentioned. But yeah, I really love that model. The next unit is still an HQ. This is the Damsel. And she is the kind of the next model that I might pull out of the list. But I'm running her as a level 2 wizard on a Bretonnia warhorse. She's got battle magic and the Ruby Ring of Ruin. I'm hoping to get 2 fireballs out of her. If I can't, then I run Hammerhand, just because it's a default pick. And I'm always picking the regen save Lore of the Lady. And what that is, you roll your dice on a 7-up, you're giving a unit a 6-up regen. On a 10-up, you're giving them the 5-up regen.
Yeah, that's why I put on the Grail Knights, to give them a save, a ward save, and then a regen. Just like, please don't die.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned at the beginning, how important deployment is to Bretonnia, and I'm sure it is for everyone, but especially to us, because I'm always getting my magic canceled after turn 1. I always set it up in exactly the right way, so I'm out of 24, and I can still cast my spell on the big block of Pegasus that we'll talk about, because it's really one chance. I've got one chance to throw up a good regen save, then they can go do their thing. And so that's what we're trying to do. And then, so going on into core, and I know in your video when you're talking about how you would run the Yeoman Guard, you run it in a block of 32. And I've done a lot of different trials, and I agree. I've settled on 32 as a block as well. It's everything from, I was thinking, oh, I'll do 2 things of 20. Maybe I'll stack them front and back so I can take a dragon for longer. The dragon just doesn't follow up. He's got such a good leadership. He just doesn't follow up things on somewhere else. And so that's not a problem, or you don't get the advantage of that. The 8 frontage is just as good as 2 20s for a 10-man frontage. And so people are getting caught in it, whether they wanted to charge something else or not. They're getting caught up by the 8 frontage. I love that. And it's just enough extra attacks with the thrusting spears that it can do something.
Yeah.
I wasn't running any extra banners on them, like besides the one you want, because there's no reason not to take a banner on a peasant. You don't give up extra points if they die. I wasn't spending the extra points until I started playing those Tomb King players from the Slow Grow League. I started running into them a lot now that they're at 2,000 points, because I'm like, I didn't really care to play 1,500 points. I just wasn't bothered by it. But now that I'm playing them, holy cow, flaming attacks is crucial to being able to not get bogged down by some little skeletons. And so they've got the burning banner just because when my block hits their block, it's enough extra that they can't res fast enough that I will eventually win that combat. And really, they could res enough if they didn't have something else to resurrect or to be resurrecting. Like if they spent all 3 of their regens on that block, they would. But as we'll talk more throughout the list, like they've got other stuff they got to spend it on, or else they're gonna fold as an army.
Yeah, fair.
So after the 32 Yeoman Guard, I've got 7 mounted Knights of the Realm, and this is the only mounted knights I run. I put the Antlers of the Great Hunt on them, and they've obviously got full command. But I don't know if everyone has a lot of terrain, but in my area, we've got a fair amount of terrain. And so because it's hard to maneuver, even though they're in a lance, it's hard to maneuver these guys. You'll often get caught just on corners or things like that. And so just being able to just say, no thanks, I'm not worried about it, is great. And that's just on the terrain. One thing I found a lot in the Magic is people are throwing out templates that have the extra terrain. So even though I'm having to take, the damage checks, not having to worry about being slowed or just every horse take a check on, it's a lot. So it's been paid for. Good.
Why, unless I'm just being daft, why 7?
Why 7? Just because it was a points issue.
Oh, right, just because you were like, I've got the points.
Yeah, I could go to 8 probably and just drop some peasant bowmen, but
it's just in my head. It's like an OCD thing in my head that like the lance, but it's not. You know what I mean, it's like an extra guy.
Well,
I know you're putting characters
when the damsel joins, because I run the damsel in them, so they still have the pip on the backside.
Yeah, she goes on the back. No, she goes at the front, but then when you engage, she drops to the back.
Yeah, and so that then bumps out a guy to the front. So I still get. I only lose one cavalry.
Yeah, fine
for their spot.
Fair.
And so it's still a lot of attacks, but
cool. Yeah. So 7 of them.
So 7 of them, and then 15 bowmen. No Villain.
Do you skirmish? Do you put me in skirmish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And one thing I found for them is it's not enough attacks to actually like kill anything outright. But the one wound that they do, like for example, I played against Warriors of Chaos, and I put 1 wound on a dragon, and it was literally the difference of that dragon dying in the subsequent combat. It was a huge deal. Like it was just, it was great. And so
worth it.
Yeah, they're a fun thing. And then worst case, I can always just sacrifice them or things like that. I can put them around my next unit, which we'll just skip special because we're talking about range units right now.
Sure.
So the peasant bowman can go around the border prince's bombard, and this is the cash money unit. Nice. I run 2 bombards, and I can't speak highly enough about this cannon. I know a lot of people are pretty down on artillery as a whole in the meta right now. But the Border Prince's Bombard is functionally a hybrid between the Empire's 2 cannons. And so it's Strength 8, it's AP 3, it's D3 plus 1 damage, and it's got Armor Bane. And so, have you described before like how a cannon shoots? Or things like that?
No, I've not gone into I mean, I've not done any stream games of it. yet either. So yeah, go for it.
So
Get into the detail.
yeah, happy to. So the cannon, you put a dice out, and then you roll your first artillery dice. And I just roll a d6, and a 6 is the miscast. Everything else you just times by 2. So if it's not a misfire, then I've got 1 through 5, which I'm going to double to 2, because that's how it would actually be on artillery dice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how far the cannonball overshoots where you targeted, if that makes sense. So then it hits the ground, and now it's going to bounce. So you roll a second artillery dice. A misfire on this is just thuds. So it overshoots where you wanted, it lands on the ground, it's stuck there. The other 2 through 10 inches is how far that cannonball is going to bounce after it hits the ground. So I'm sure you've seen lots of movies. I think Patriot has a really good scene where a cannonball hits the ground before the flank and just rips through the guys.
Brutal.
And that's what's happening. And so everything in between where it hits the ground and where it ends up takes a hit. You're not further rolling to hit. You're going to go straight to the wound. And because it's strength 8, nearly everything in the game is getting wounded on a 2-up.
Yeah.
And so it's very consistent throwing out hits. And if it hits a large target, though, it's a thud, and it just stops. And so very often my opponents will hide something behind a large target, but it'll rip through a whole unit of infantry. And I've caught people out multiple times that say, hey, I'm not putting my spellcaster in this block of infantry simply because I don't want you to challenge him out with your characters and just charge them.
The cannon's like,
so they put him behind, and I explain it all to him. Like I'm kind of an oversharer when it comes to games because I don't want any gotcha.
Yeah.
And so I tell them like, hey, if you do this, this is the trade off. You can decide. And I've sniped out spellcasters with the bounce, but there's a bit of a luck game to it. But it's pretty cool. And it can throw out a lot of damage. Like you figure between the 2 cannons, it's 8 damage that I can do to a single model. And in that same game where the archers got 1 wound on the dragon, I did 8 wounds with the cannons to the dragon over the course of the game.
Oh wow, nice.
And so it was good. It was good. But you need 2. You can't get away with 1 because almost every round of shooting, one of the cannons is either firing short. Because there's some math on where you want to put that first marker. For example, like if it's a dragon, you're putting it 10 inches off the back corner because it's got a 6-inch base. And so then if you skip that first 10 inches on the first dice, you still hit the back end of that dragon. So you're not going to overshoot it. And there's different math based on different unit sizes, but you can undershoot. And so if you go too far off the front, you roll a 2-inch move with a 1 on the dice, and the subsequent dice also, you've only moved 4 inches. And so you could undershoot. So there's undershooting, there's misfires, there's lots of different ways to not hit the target. If you're only running 1, I found almost every game one of my cannons doesn't do something that turn. And so I definitely do that.
How many points are there?
They're 100 points a pop. And every game, except against Tomb Kings, they have made their points back plus some.
Nice.
If someone's running a giant or something like that, that's the ideal target because you can't you can't overshoot it on the skip or something like that. It's just really good hitting them. Oftentimes giants and the like are worth 200 points. And so you can just focus it down and say, hey, I've made my points back on something I really didn't want to fight in combat. And so
nice. And then sometimes the peasant bowmen screen them. You were saying this, or sometimes stand in front. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and then so usually it's the yeoman guard that are sitting in front of them, but there's a lot of games, especially against Tomb Kings, that they've got the scorpions, and so I'll just pepper out the peasant bowman around just to further push out how far those scorpions can be, and then that way it gives me time to redirect some of my units to come deal with those scorpions when they finally come out of ambush.
Nice.
I haven't played against Beastman Brayherds yet, but I'm sure all of those models coming in from ambush will be a different beast than just hey, like 2 to 3 scorpions are coming at me.
Cool.
But in the special, this is where the list it's built around. It's Pegasus Knights. So I've got 2 blocks of 3. They both have full command, but one of them has an Exiles special banner upgrade, and this is why the list loves to go first. So it's the banner of the Zealous Knight. and it gives them a Vanguard move.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so if I'm going first, the 3 Pegasus Knights in that unit, plus the Baron, plus my Challenge Paladin are starting 10 inches up the board. And
so that's a 5-man unit. So you chuck 2 in there, basically.
Yeah, I've chucked 2 characters in there.
Cheeky.
Yeah, and it's if I'm going first, between the Vanguard move and their 19-inch charge range, even if you park something directly in front of them across your board that I didn't want to fight, I can Vanguard on an angle enough that I can pick something I want to swing at.
Yeah.
And if I go first, it sets the tempo for the whole game, because my cannons get a chance to shoot, and it's going to shoot what I want, and often enough it's kill something, like even something like a chariot, where it's like, yeah, it's not a ton of points, like a 100-point chaos chariot. It'll delete those, and now their flanking unit that they kind of thought they're going to rely on to skirt around is gone.
Yeah, it's rough for an opponent if they're getting charged in the first turn and they're getting shot on the list. It's a rough first turn. Like, oh great, the cannons have killed that, and I've also been charged and hit by this sort of death unit of Pegasus Knights and 2 characters.
Yeah, it completely sets the pace for the whole game if I go first. And the Falcon Horn of Freedom goes off and they're not flying. So even when I explain to my opponent that, hey, like your dragon, a good chance is not flying, for some reason, most people still put it behind a unit, especially Tomb Kings.
And you're just like, sit down.
Yeah, they're like, hey, I'm just going to string it behind these infantry. It's a necromancer on a dragon, so I'll just cast over top anyway. I'm like, okay, but you're going to be stuck there. And so that's one game. That's the number one way that I've dealt with dragons, is just avoiding them and making it so they can't fly. So because they still have to pivot because they're close order units, it really slows them down.
Yeah, great.
In a huge way.
I like that tech, mate. This list is sounding really good. I'm liking it so far. What else have we got? What else you got up your sleeve?
That's the list. So it's the 2 units of 3 Pegasus Knights is the last units that we haven't covered.
So you've got 6 Pegasus Knights altogether. Yeah, you've got a unit of 3 that you put the 2 characters in. Yeah, and you've got another 3.
Yeah, and so on my first turn, the unit of 3 by themselves, they just, if they can charge, great, but they usually can't if I'm going first. They move up to just outside the opponent's charge range, which is inside my next turn charge range. They charge further than almost everything else in the game because I've turned off their flying. And so anything else that could charge far enough is a flying unit that can't fly. So they're sitting in my charge range, and I've got the War Banner Paladin next to them. And so they're the ones that are picking up the combat res. The other guys can kill enough that they've got the combat res, but this is really what gets that second block of knights to be hitting hard enough.
Cool.
And then subsequent turns, the 360 charge range from the skirmish, it's been hard because it's tough to get in the 5-man, especially once I have a Royal Pegasus in there. They're not all swinging, so the musician's basically a blade of wounds, and so that's been tough. But I've tried using a lance, but losing the 360 charge range just never been worth it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I hit them, I always follow up. Like, yeah, I'll just keep going. I don't roll my Swift Stride extra, but making sure that the opponent can't charge because they're all close order units. And so I've pushed back their charge arc, and then the next turn, I'm in their backside, and I can charge whatever I want. I don't have to turn around because I'm a skirmish unit. And that really panics opponents.
Nice. So the play style then sounds sort of like you've obviously got like a first turn charge, very aggressive units, but it sounds like you've got some modules in there that kind of hold, like just sit back and just protect those bombards and just kind of whittle an opponent down. Like,
So
what do you do with the guard? What do you do with the peasant, the yeoman guard? What's their kind of game plan?
So ideally, they're there to stop anyone that wants to kill the cannons and push through. And the list is a little bit win more in the sense that this isn't a list that's going to win a tournament. It's just not. Like there's stuff out there that's just going to table me, and that's going to be life. It's a mid-table army for sure, but it gives my opponent something to kill if they want to and feel good about themselves. And so
punch bag in there, just like, go on then, beat it up.
Yeah.
Beat up the peasants.
Yeah, I'll send the peasants forward a little bit, and then oftentimes that they're block a unit. So Like usually it's like Chaos Warriors. They're like, all right, here, my big block of Chaos Warriors. They're gonna go churn into them. Like, yeah,
You're
you
like,
get
okay,
them.
go on then, that'd be fun.
So then their middle charges forward, but it also makes it really easy for the Pegasus in the back to then flank charge later.
Yeah.
Right. So that my Yeoman Guard, they're gonna last at least one turn of combat, probably two, and so then by the time that's resolved, then the Pegasus can sweep back around and pick up the backside of that combat, get the rear charge bonus, and then sweep and clean that up. So
what in your experience stops this being top tier then? 'Cause it sounds good on paper. Like this sounds like a really cool list. It's got like a first turn threat. It's, it can play defensively, just whittling you down. It can threaten your flanks. Like it's got some hard hitting characters. It's good in challenges. It's good against dragons by the sounds of it. What are some of the weaknesses? What prevents it being what you like a top tier list?
yeah, the number one thing is just better lists. So my first GT I went to, I ran into a great human being with an amazing Warriors of Chaos list. So it was a dragon and 9 dragon ogres, and he was great. His name's Carmine. He's down in Houston. Great human being, and he taught me a lot about the game. I'd actually only played like 2 games before I played him, and the list has changed a lot since then. But I think I'd still run into the same problems. I didn't go first. If I'd have gone first, it might have been a different game because I would have gotten the Falcon Horn off. But basically, everything just stepped into my face right out the gate. I had vanguarded my Pegasus Knights up. I'm like, you know what? What are the chances the dragon really gets his max charge range off? It's still pretty good. Like, I'd only played 2 games. Like, I didn't realize how likely it is with your fly and the 2d6 take the best and the Swift Stride. I'm like, yeah, it's likely you get 19 inches. Yeah. It's pretty likely. And so my unit got charged right out the gate, and I just got tabled so fast. The Dragon Ogres just marched. They were in combat the next turn, and I was still running Foot Knights at that point.
Oh yeah, tell me about the Foot Knights. 'Cause I was excited about the Foot Knights. The models are amazing. Love the idea. I love the idea of them just kind of marching up the field.
Yeah,
what's your experience been like playing them?
So my experience has been they get killed all the time before I ever want them to do anything. And even in the most ideal circumstances where I get the charge, and I tried them a lot of different ways. One of the most successful ways I did was a block of 20, line hammered out to 14 wide with just a minimum rank in the back to get a rank bonus. And then I put a damsel on foot, and I put the outcast wizard in there with demonology. That was the most powerful I'd made them. And what often ended up happening was I'm losing the magic phase. And so I'd get Steed of Shadows off, and I would do a 24, depending on the match. But I would get into combat where next turn I'd be able to charge. Mm-hmm. Because I just Steed of Shadows up to where I needed to be, because they're flying now with 12. It's a huge fly on that spell. I'd get them up there, but then subsequently I'm never getting my demonology spells off because there's always a level 4 wizard. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes the Warriors of Chaos, and I'm just struggling to get the spell anyway. And so kind of teching magic to try to get them over the hill is just not enough.
It's not happening. So is it an issue of like just not a good enough set? Like, what do they come in at? Like they've got heavy armor, right? So they're on 5 ups. They've got shields, so shooting 4 ups. Shields, but then once they're in combat,
you're always running a great sword. You're going to run a great sword. So in combat, they're still the 5 up. If anything makes you take saves, you're going to lose models. So you're starting at I1. If you get a max charger at I4, well, now you're swimming simultaneously. And this circumstance has happened to me enough times that it's just like, here's the example. You're going into Warriors of Chaos. They're just foot warriors, not knights. But you're swinging at the same time as them. They've got a better save because they've got the armor. They get their shields because you run a shield and hand weapon.
Yeah.
They're at AP1 and they're at strength 4. So you're simultaneous. They potentially have more attacks if they're frenzied or not, but that's one of the options. If they're not frenzied, you're rerolling 6s. So it's really dependent on which one to do. Yeah, because you're hitting on 4s and you're rerolling a third of your hits and only picking up half of them the next time. So it's punishing.
It's bad.
Yeah. And so or they've got the extra attacks to swing on you. So you're hitting them on 3s with your great weapons, and they're hitting you back on 3s with their hand weapons. You're at AP2, they're at AP1. you're actually at the same save. If that makes sense.
Because they've got heavy armor shield.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're both at the same save. It washes out pretty close to how you kill them. Just trading.
Uh-huh.
Depending if you roll well against the Nurgle or if they roll poorly with the frenzy attacks. It washes out pretty close. The points cost is very, very much the same. Like it's within like 2 points of each other at 10 units of the Chaos versus the Foot Knights. However, that's if you charge them. If they charge you, you're just getting swept.
You're not attacking simultaneously.
Yeah, because you're going to lose half your unit, and then yeah. So
you've not really been able to find a use for them, and it sounds like there's probably not a clear and obvious way to make them strong.
Yeah, to make them strong, definitely not. All the spells when they go off, it's cool, but at that point you're spent an extra 300 points onto the 300-point unit to try to make them.
Yeah, and you're kind of describing a meta by which just Bretonnia are not doing the spells, like they're just not getting much of a magic phase because of the denial that's existing on the other side of the board. So maybe in some metas where that's not as prevalent or the opponent's not got a very strong wizard lineup, there's something there, but it seems like most people do. Like most people take magic seriously and pack some level 4s in and shoot you down.
The other way, kind of after progressively putting more and more points into making them a killing unit, I've gone flip the script and done minimum size units to try to see if that is kind of better. It's a completely different goal. You're like, hey, you're going to hit my Yeoman Guard. My Yeoman Guard is staggered, an 1.5 inches in front of my Foot Knights on either side. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Chaos Guy, you're charging the Yeoman Guard with your frenzied attacks. I fall back 2 inches. Now I'm flank charging you with these knights.
Yeah,
they've got Furious Charge, which is cool.
Is that an extra attack? Does that give you an extra attack when you charge?
Extra attack, yeah. The flank charge, most of them are supporting attacks against a big line of Chaos Warriors, and so it doesn't end up being that much extra. But at any rate,
does that work? So they're sort of. Have you had any success with that?
A little bit, but still, now you've got to add the Yeoman Guard points into the
now you're like, oh man,
right? So now you're adding 230 points onto this 160 point unit. So it's still you're still using like triple the points to counter your opponent's points.
Yeah,
and that's just not trading right.
It still feels like they sort of die to, like, if someone's got like a cheap missile unit and they just lever a load of shots at them, you're probably going to lose a few. And then all of a sudden that flank charge is not looking too scary. Yeah.
Each unit of 10 is going to kill one of your guys.
Yeah.
And so you start feeling that pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. What other units have you kind of tried and maybe have not quite synergized in the list, or are there any that you've got your eye on that you're kind of hoping to get in and try in the coming months?
Well, I've tried making the questing knights work because they're the same cost as Knights of the Realm. And so I thought that was cool. They're beautiful models. Absolutely
they're great. Yeah, really cool. Yeah, I like it.
And so I ran them, and if they've got to make them T4 and Strength 4 base because they run into the same thing. The problem is the Foot Knights do. They're just faster at it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I imagine from what you've just described with the Foot Knights, the Questing Knights just experience the same issue. Mm-hmm. They kind of go
exactly, but they're doing it at a lower initiative. Like the Knights of the Realm have the same strength that the Questing Knights do, but they're at a much higher initiative. And so
it's a real shame because like they're great models, and in your head you would think that's quite fearsome. You know what I mean? Like a bunch of guys like cells, you think it's quite decent.
Thematically, it should work a lot better. Yeah. And if they were the same strength as the Chaos people, then it would. It would. Being Strength 6 would do it, and Toughness 4.
Yeah.
Which is why the Pegasus Knights work. The Pegasus Knights have twice the attacks on the horse that the basic Knights do on the ground. Mm-hmm. Plus their Strength 4, Toughness 4 out the gate. And that's why those lances work, because they're hitting the Chaos horses, wounding on 2s. And that's what pushes you through those combats. The Mountain Knights of the Realm, there's a lot of the matches I've played, whether it's Dark Elves, whether it's Chaos, whether it's Lizardmen. Actually, the Lizardman game I played, he thought his cold ones were a 2-up, but they don't take shields. And so he's like, yep, they got full plate, they're a cavalry, they're a 2-up, and I just took it as a word.
Yeah, and then after you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
That's not
yeah.
right.
That's definitely a sub conversation because I am very generous when it comes to that. I'm like, hey man, you know your army,
Yeah.
it's fine. And we're also new to the game. I make mistakes, and I would definitely hope that no one would think that if I did something wrong, it was in bad taste. Like it's like we're gonna make mistakes. We'll figure it out. We'll all get better. And so when it happens, I'm like, oh, cool. We talk about it, and next time it's fine.
Yeah, no, fair. This is a really cool list, man. I really appreciate you chatting through it. And I've got like a feeling that it's probably, it doesn't sound like it's not a top list. It sounds really good. Like I mean, the theory machine in my head of imagining the list on the table and some of those interactions that you've got on the threat feels pretty cool. And it's a little bit different to your standard Bretonian list, right? You're wanting to go first.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, and that catches people
yeah,
out.
like,
Like,
yeah,
I'll
that's
tell
what I mean.
them.
People are like, oh, Bretonia, right? No, I want to go. I want to get in your grill. I want to get in your grill straight away. So it feels quite a cool variation of a standard Bretonian list. And it sounds like that game where things went rough might have gone differently if you were to play it again. You might
Oh,
not have.
this same
You know what I
list.
mean?
If I
So,
ran this list and played it again, it would definitely go different. I've played 20 games since then, and so it's completely different. I'm a different player, and the list has improved a lot too. So it might go a lot different. But man, there are some powerful lists out there.
what's the
And
strongest list you've seen? What are some of the sort of like horror stories or like horror lists you've come across in your meta?
Yeah, a lot of high toughness. So if someone's running 9 Dragon Ogres, that's just hard to deal with. But we had an RTT at our local shop. We're just playing, and this guy rocks up. I never met him before, and he's got a screamer list. And so this is kind of the first time I'd seen it played. And to his credit, he's not running maximum screams. He's got a unit of Blood Knights instead of a second Terrorgeist. But he resurrected 20 Blood Knights over the course of the event. So like there's some advantages to that too, right? But yeah, he tabled all of his opponents at the event.
Great.
And so I think this list does have the potential to play into that as Exiles more than a normal Bretonnia list because all of my knights are veteran and I'm going to get 2 chances to roll under that modified leadership check. And so surprisingly, this might be one of the better lists against that, especially if my cannons can skip over the skeleton blob in front of the Mortis engine because those only have 5 wounds. And so if I can hit it with 2 cannonballs, it's likely going to die.
Flatten it, yeah, nice.
And so that would actually be a fun matchup, which brings me to one of the next iterations. So I was going to drop the Damsel to run, basically upgrade my Battle Paladin to Royal Pegasus, and then add more Pegasus Knights. Because basically I can upgrade him and run 2 more Pegasus Knights for her cost. However, that Screamer list runs a bunch of ethereal screening, just a couple little 3 units of ethereal, because if you're not playing against Warriors of Chaos, there's not a lot of magic weapons, just kind of generally. And so my list struggles against ethereal, and I didn't really know what it was for a rule until I played a high elf player, and his unit of white lions is I was coming in to bully him, and he just cast the high elf or a high magic spell that gives him ethereal, and I couldn't do a thing.
Yeah, because you can only damage him with magic attacks. Basically.
Exactly, yeah. And so I've only got the Frontier X if I take the Damsel out. The Damsels have a lot of nice things about them that make a lot of advantages. So the Damsel gives the whole unit she's in magical attacks. So now those Knights of the Realm all have magical attacks on the lances. Those will just kill the unit of White Lions, a good chance of cutting in half. Or the little 3 Spirit Hosts or something they're called in the Vampire list. It'll definitely kill those. And so she helps push them through all that. One thing I want to highlight about the lady is the Shield of the Lady rule, which you've probably talked about. But basically, a unit strength of 10 or more, she gets to leave the fighting rank, but still cast as if she's in the fighting rank. And so you put Hammer Hand on her. Most of the time, people don't want assailment spells on their wizards because they're out of combat, or you don't want them in the combat rank anyway. She'll be in the middle of that lance, throwing out the spell if it's not getting dispelled.
Yeah.
And so potentially she can do a lot of hate.
Yeah, nice. So you've got a concern about taking her, because so your option there was to take her out and kind of and basically bring in another Pegasus Knight unit, so you'd have 3 units of
Two.
Pegasus Knight, or you'd
Or
bring,
so two
you
models.
bring 2 more, so you would have your sort of like Killy Vanguard brick. You'd have a normal 3, and then you would bring in another 2 that you would then put another character in. But that leaves you pretty
Well,
vulnerable.
they're minimum 3, so I would run the unit of 3 with a Vanguard banner.
Yeah.
The second unit of 3, that's the turn 2 charge. They'd be unit of 5.
Sorry, you'd put 2 more in that unit of 3. Okay.
Yeah.
But then you'd be quite vulnerable, magic wise. You'd be
Not even a chance to dispel. And if someone happens to have Ethereal, my list is just hard countered, so I can't do anything.
And you kind of lose that nice ward save, the regen spell that you can throw out.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like, it's quite a nice.
So a little loss of durability. So I don't know if it's worth the extra increase in killing power. Not to mention it's hard to get 5 Pegasus Knights in one combat.
Yeah,
and so
just logistically with the wings, it's annoying. You're kind of like, I'm always like just taking them off, being like, can I just put the bases down and I'm all over there because like, it's so annoying. Like,
that's not about it. My opponents have been pretty gracious. I usually end up putting one model where it should be, then everything else is kind of tiered out like this.
Yeah, and you're like,
and they're pretty good about it.
We
know they're across.
Yeah,
we draw the measurements right, but
nice.
It definitely doesn't look as nice because the wings, you can't do it.
Yeah, they're just jabbing each other.
Right.
Mate, that's a really cool. It's a really cool list. I'd love for you to keep us up to date with how it's going and like keep in touch, and we do more discussions and chats together about the evolution of your list and you know.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another event coming up next weekend, so we'll see how it goes. I'll probably play the vampire list, so we'll see.
Yeah, cool. Let's do a show after you've done that, and you can give us an update on how it went. If you can keep a record of your games, like we'll do a show and we'll chat through each of the games, and you can talk about what happened. Take some pictures, and we'll do. We'll do a tournament report with you showing the games, and you can chat through. Take a picture for each turn actually, and then we can do little battle reports.
Oh, that'd be great! Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. And do some little vids. Cool, mate. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. This conversation's really inspired me to get back on painting. I'm working through my Bretonnias. I can see them up there on the shelf. I'm gradually getting them all painted. But I juggle many Warhammer hats at the moment. But this chat has really invigorated me to get back on. Move those Tyranids that I've got over there and get back on painting my finishing off what am I on next? Yeah, I've got another unit of Knights of the Realm to finish, so I'll crack on with them. But what I'm not going to be doing after this chat